Yo guys, and welcome to another chess lifestyle stream. Welcome Melora. Why? The reason is because I'm not gonna have any time to stream tomorrow, so it's basically now or never. But the good news is I have packed, and after the stream, I will swiftly head to bed, and there shouldn't be any problem catching my flight or trains tomorrow. It should all be good. So yeah, it's gonna be fine. I've had to go to bed far later and wake up far earlier, so we'll be fine. We'll be fine. But as promised, the reason why I am calling this the Antoshin Philidor Part 2 is because we are going to now have a look at Part 2 of this opening. So what we've covered so far is basically, okay, when my internet loads, we are basically going to look at this final position that we have here. And what we looked at in part 1 was just dissecting what happens in this endgame line, which I think we came to like a lot of useful conclusions. I mean, just to finish up with that, just to say that I did have a quick look further. Basically, like this knight c3 move instead of bishop c4, we could potentially play bishop e6 if we wanted to. But there's no real need. We can just play c6, which makes sense against the knight, and just transpose to the main line. Or if bishop e3 first, again, we could potentially play with bishop e6 first. But again, no need. Just transpose to the main line, and then, you know, we're going to get more practice. And I found that actually knight f3, which isn't really within the structure of the main line because white wants to reserve the right to play f4. I found that this is just too slow entirely, because now we can play this knight d7 idea, and this time when white develops everything, we're in time to play bishop c5, this timely exchange, and the point being that, this shouldn't have an arrow. I've tried to signpost the study so that it's easier to navigate with the different variations, and yeah, we're in time to play king c7, and then we've traded off our worst bishop. White's not even getting some initiative on the king side, and yeah, we're doing completely fine. So the only move I need to still look at some point is f4, which is going to be slightly different, but it's actually losing a lot of the objectivity. F4 is just like closer to equal, so I'm sure it'll be fine. And yeah, I looked at, what else did I look at? Yeah, like any of this knight c3 now, again, this just transposes. So this is the nice thing, right? It's just a really simple endgame, I think, once we dissected it in the first part of the video. And a lot of these sidelines are basically just transposing to the main line, or just simply much slower than the main line. So on that note, let's now move to the critical e4 theory. Maybe stream today like 10-15 minutes, and some other days you can do 40 minutes because you need rest. I'll be fine, Melora. Thank you for the concern, but don't worry, I'll be all right. Yeah, I would probably have stayed up anyway, so it's not a problem. But yeah, basically, what I want to now look at is this main position here, where we get this setup and with bishop e7. And for the record, this can actually come about in many ways, to my understanding. So for instance, we can actually reach this position from an Alekhine declined, right? Where white plays with knight c3 and black can play e5 here. Black can play some weird Scandinavian French defense type position, which is like the main line. But you can also just play d6, and then after d4, would you know it, we just play e5, and suddenly we have this same Philidor position. And finally then, as well, against the Jobava, with this move order, you can also play d6 here, and who would guess we also have this same position reached. And this would, again, be some kind of endgame position. Actually, I inputted this before I did that endgame stream just now. And I guess this would actually be something quite different, because you don't get to play f6. We can't transpose to the lines that we looked at. But maybe this is something like you can play bishop b4 with initiative, because, yeah, if they don't play bishop d2, and they go after a pawn like this, then we can take this pawn, and there's some kind of initiative on c3, right? So there's this endgame line that maybe is worth looking into as well. But the point is, okay, if e5 and they play the move knight f3, well, then we can take and play bishop e7. So the point is, this exact setup is actually able to come about in a lot of different lines. And this is kind of the main line of the Toshin Philidor. Now, the reason why I am recommending this d6 move order, not only for the fact that we can get this endgame line that we studied just now, but if we were to play the move e5, well, I already discussed how there's like all this Vienna stuff or King's Gambit stuff that you'd have to learn on top. But even if they were to play knight of 3 and we played d6, in this position, I just feel like there's more common ways to decline it. Like white could literally just play bishop c4, knight c3, h3, d3, maybe play in a more Giuoco piano kind of way, and just refuse to enter like the mainline Philidor positions with d4. And I realized that when you play with d6 immediately, firstly, your opponent doesn't know that you may not go into a Philidor. And firstly, if they play knight f3, they have to reckon with the fact that maybe you'll play c5 and enter an open Sicilian, which white may not play. So that is already restricting some white players from playing this knight f3. Also, white is probably expecting that black might just play a modern, right? So there's no reason not to play d4, which probably is going to be their preparation against modern. And if they do play knight f3, it's also not the end of the world. We can just play e5. And we get to similar positions, or maybe... Actually, I wonder in this position with knight f3, like I haven't spent enough time researching this yet, but perhaps knight f6 is the way to go, right? Because you already hit the pawn, there's no more d4 because you'll just take it, there's no bishop c4 because you just take it. So that provokes knight c3. And then in this position, yeah, maybe white can just play bishop c4 and we just get a normal game. Which probably needs to be looked into. I haven't done enough research to understand this part yet, but probably against this setup, there's a very good chance that our opponent will be playing with d4, we take, and play bishop e7. So this is the main move. We get there like this, and this is the start of our theory. So at this moment here, after these 5 moves that reach the starting position, basically white has several options. The main lines include bishop f4 and g3, so we can consider these 2 main options kind of like the same as like, I don't know, the Roy Lopez and the Giuoco piano in this setup, right? Like in this position, okay, you've got the Scotch, you've got the Ponziani, you've got some different options, but at this moment here, you've got bishop c4, which is the Giuoco piano, and bishop b5 is the Roy Lopez. So I think bishop f4 and g3 are kind of like the 2 main lines, and then you've got a bunch of like quieter lines as well. And let me just make sure that everything's working. Okay, yeah, just didn't want to be muted for the whole stream. So in this position here, I want to cover this bishop f4 and this g3 move first, and then we can take a look at some other moves at this point. So I think starting with the g3 move makes sense. We get this setup, and white basically plays g3. I think with the idea to like kind of prevent black from like playing this d5 push. And for that exact reason, the most interesting line of this Antoshin variation. Now, for the record, there are many ways to play the Antoshin variation, but the point is that it's actually many of the ways are just very passive and not so interesting at all. So I've literally picked the most interesting lines that black can aim for in this Antoshin variation. So I think the immediate d5 makes a lot of sense because we're playing this while we can before the bishop has great control. So this is the way to remember d5 now. And in this position, white has some options. Either they can take, either they can play bishop g2, or they can push. Now at this moment, white really only has one way for like a serious advantage, which is e5. We should probably understand the different moves, ed5 and bishop g2, but let's start with e5 because, you know, if you don't even find this good, then then there might not be much more point for you to watch the video further, right? But I want to show you that this is much more interesting than Engine first suggests. So knight g4 is the move, basically threatening to recapture the pawn. And in this position, bishop g2 is played, now putting pressure on this pawn. And in this position, the main move here, if you check with database, I hope I'm correct with this, it should be castles. So yeah, castles on Masters database is most commonly played. But as you can see, knight takes e5 is predominantly played on lead chess of 2500s and above. And the reason why is because knight takes e5 leads to the most interesting positions. And the point is here that white basically only has two good moves, either to take on d5 with a knight or play queen e2. And I'd like to start by showing you the lines after knight takes d5. And for the record, as you can see, right, like, you know, Stockfish's eval jumps all over the place. Like suddenly it's plus 0.5, next it's plus 0.9, earlier down here it was plus 0.7. Like it really struggles to make up its mind, and the positions are very nuanced and tricky. So I would probably consider not, like, you know, taking too much serious consideration over the eval, just try and understand the position. So in this situation here, we've grabbed a pawn. We're a pawn up. So white grabs the pawn back. Now, at this moment here, I want to explain to you a really interesting idea. And basically, it looks like black has a super duper tactic here, which is to move bishop h3. And the reason why this looks super duper is because if the bishop were to take, well, then we could play queen takes d5, hitting this rook. It's not so easy to defend. And if white were to castle to get out of this, then there's the great tactic queen takes d4, and we are making use of the fact that this fork on f3 exists. So this would be a fantastic way to win, and this would be a big blunder. But the problem with bishop h3 is that this beautiful combination, in order to win material, just doesn't work, because white will play knight takes c7 here, winning a pawn, and only then, once the queen is misplaced, now play bishop takes h3, and now there's not really much to do. Like black can try and develop, white will simply avoid the trade. White is the bishop pair, white even has a pawn up, and white is doing completely well. So at first glance you might think, okay, this position is just not working, this tactic is just a little trick, and if they know knight takes c7 it's just not going to work. But then you realize that actually after knight takes d5, the main theory and the top move in this position is to move bishop g4. Now the reason behind this is that in this position, either I think white loses a clear tempo with knight e2, and I wonder actually what is the follow-up in this position. I guess this needs to be looked at as well. But the point is that this queen is being attacked, right? And ideally you don't want to play f3 and block this bishop. Probably that might even lose actually with queen takes d5. So the white queen needs to move, and as we can see, the queen is actually not able to go to any of these squares, so it has to go to d2. And the very cool thing about this position is that now you can play bishop h3, and now, of course, still the same problem. They can't take on h3 because we can take on d5, and again, this tactic isn't working. This time for multiple reasons, but I do like the simplicity of just the fact that we can take here and make use of the same tactic that we just showed. So this is a mistake. And then the other thing to note is that in this position after bishop h3, so playing bishop g4 first, now this knight takes c7 resource, which was working in the previous line, now it doesn't work because after queen takes c7 and bishop takes h3, now we can hit the knight, and this time if white were to try and retreat, retaining the bishop pair, a pawn up, well, now the queen is on d2. So that extra move, provoking queen d2, now gets hit. So that is why we needed this bishop g4 first to weaken the f3 square, and then now this is actually working out. So this is really nice. And that is why in this position a lot of players, okay, I should have king f1 as the line as well. But a lot of players would play bishop g2, which is just a mistake. And let me see if I can remember why. Oh yeah, I think in this position, it was to do with some eventual bishop b4, but what was the way to get it? What was the way to get it? I think it was rook d8 here, and in that position, white would secure the knight with c3, and then we take, and then we have this amazing move bishop b4, skewering the queen to the king, and when the queen takes, then we can play knight d3. So yeah, I think, it wasn't rook d8, but castle's queenside, so the same idea applies. I wonder if, okay, rook d8 actually doesn't work due to knight b5, wow. Okay, so hitting this, so we can't just take, but castle's queenside, I guess there's no knight b5 because we just take on d2, they take on c7, And wow, we can play take on c2, and the rook lives. That's very interesting. So on king d1, yeah, we can just take on f2, hitting this piece. Yeah, so this is just not possible. So in this position, if they play c3, the point is that we can take, they take back, and we've got this bishop b4 move, and then hit them with the fork. So this whole line of this g3 line, this is like a main line. The thing is, if white plays g3 here, they need to know a lot of different theory, because in this position, d5 is not the only move. You can play castles, you can play knight c6, but d5 is definitely the line that I like the look of the most, just because of how fun this idea is when we can play knight takes e5 and our opponent takes on d5. I think we've got really good prospects there. So given that, the best move in this position is actually to play the move queen e2. And players who are very booked up and are playing g3, bishop g2 probably will know this move, unless they don't and then they fall into this stuff. But on queen e2, I found that the most objectively correct move is to play knight ec6, which has the most theory. But I also found that this knight bc6 is very logical, developing a piece. And what is the problem? Well, in this position, remember, we're up a pawn, right? We won this pawn. And in this position, if they take, which is the only correct move, like any other move gives up the advantage immediately. The idea is that they want to take, we take back. Of course, we can't take with the pawn, protecting our pawn because the knight is hanging. So we have to take with the knight. And here they can take our pawn. So we now become equal material. And the very interesting thing here is that we can get this endgame where basically, okay, this is also an option as well where we can take with a knight, but I've given queen takes and you'll see why. We can get this position, or okay, they can perhaps give up their bishop pair advantage and cripple our pawn structure, but then we have opposite colored bishops. And I think this is still very interesting, like they've got some light square weaknesses. I think this is an interesting game that should be studied. But in this position, this is like the most critical try. And as you can see, Engine evaluates this position as plus 0.9. When you actually check with database, this has been played 3 times. Gawain Jones, who is now 2700, playing a 2450 player, draw. We have 2600 Booman against Boussard, who's 2200, draw. And we have Vodvin against Anikonov, also draw. So in all 3 of these cases, white has been a stronger player with a plus 0.9 position, but black has managed to draw every time. Now, okay, a sample size of 3 might not say everything. However, let's take a look at the games. So, yeah, this is one of the games. So as you can see that the Philidors come from the e5 move order, but it doesn't matter, we get to the starting position, right? They play g3. Because white is going to play bishop g2 next and we can't play d5, we want to play d5 now. And then they push e5, which is the only move for advantage, knight g4, bishop g2, and we take the pawn. And here, they have the choice whether to play queen e2 or take the pawn. Now actually, why can't they just castle here? Is this just garbage? Aha, we just played c6, so I want to add this to our main theory as well. This is probably worth knowing. Like, what happens if they just play the very human castles? Well, we just solidify our pawn up. And in this position, I'm a bit worried about whether our king will be under attack, but it looks like we're actually fine. Like, knight g6 looks more natural than weakening our king side with f6. So knight g6. And okay, the theory actually continues here. Wow. Yeah, so this needs to be looked at as well. So let's just draw an arrow here. We can look at this in a bit later. But for now, let's get back to this endgame line where this happens, and we'll analyze this game. So this was between Booman and Boussard. So let's see how it goes. So we play this knight bc6, which is slightly less popular, but we get to this very concrete endgame where we basically have the disadvantage of knight and bishop against 2 bishops. However, not so easy to win. In this position, Boussard plays with c6, trying to blunt this bishop. And white aims to double fianchetto. Now in this position, black develops. Also, white plays this c4 move, preventing black from getting this strong square for the knight, and that is basically why such a position is generally unfavorable for the knight, because when the pawns are very symmetrical, very solid, no weaknesses, the knight struggles to find a home. Like, this would be like one of its ideal squares, and now it can't. So the knight heads to g6, and here you'll see that in a few moves I really like black's decision, to play f6 here. And as you can see, if you remember in the last stream, I mentioned how like the pawns on f6 and c6 were like, it came up in the last stream and I said it would come up again. Well, here they are. And you see how the pawns are just completely shutting down these pieces. And in this position, we got this situation. Black just was offering to trade rooks, white didn't want to. And black was just super solid, like playing this really interesting setup with the pawns. And eventually playing c5, closing the position down here. And basically, black did not allow white in at all. And white tried to play on, but as you can see, black has managed to find a square for their knight. And once the knight gets onto one of these squares, then there is no way to continue. And yeah, there is just no way for white to make progress. And actually, yeah, they traded into a opposite color bishop endgame. White managed to win a pawn, but it didn't matter. This position is just a draw because black has successfully blockaded. There's no good way for the king to come in, and actually the players just agreed. I mean, okay, the king can come in, but I think the point is that the bishop can always protect this backwards pawn, and the king can just always shuffle between two squares, and there's just no way to make progress here. So I felt like this was actually a pretty clean draw, and the very interesting thing is actually in this position. So let's go from the start just to remind ourselves. Okay, they played with e5 as well. Doesn't really matter as long as we get to the setup. And here, white wants to play bishop g2, stopping d5. So we play d5. They push. We play knight g4. They play bishop g2. We take immediately rather than the old main line of castling. And in this position, they do not take because that allows the bishop g4, bishop h3 tactic. They play queen e2. And in this position, here we play the less popular knight bc6. If they take, we take. And then they take the pawn. And then in this position, we castle. And then they take, and we take, and they take, and we take, and we get to the starting position. So here, white went straight away with b3. And as you can see, like lots of moves are working well here. But b3, and again, even though the bishop didn't go to b2 this time, black still liked this option of going f6. So I think this is a starting point just to control some of these central squares and just limit any weaknesses on these diagonals. I think this is a good starting point before maybe later, once everything is developed, open up this position when the rook is like no longer vulnerable on a8. So I think this is a starting point is a good idea. And then, okay, maybe I'm not a fan of a6, like why weaken the square. Like I like how Bouman, was it Bouman? Was that his name? Yeah, Boussard. How Boussard handled it with b6 and g6. I liked this idea quite a lot. But in any case, basically, black doubled on the e-file. White did not really achieve anything with their bishops. Eventually, black was able to push f5 rather than c5 this time and establish a nice outpost on e4. And once there's an outpost, then there was a way for black to get a piece there. And actually, black is the one now with the slight advantage, having made an outpost for their knight. Despite not having the bishop pair, suddenly black is actually in the driver's seat, and I guess Gwaine offered a draw and Jahar agreed. Or maybe it was the other way around, but in any case, black has a slight edge. So clearly this position actually is more nuanced, and I think the player with more understanding and experience of these structures will again come out on top more often than not. I mean, ultimately, if a 2600 against a 2200 can't grind out an advantage, then clearly it's not as simple as just plus 0.9. Is this from your personal prep? Kinda, yeah. I mean, basically a lot of this I like worked out today. Some of this I worked out like 3 years ago, and I played like this Philidor for a very brief time, maybe like for a month or two. But then I got distracted with something else. Like I started playing like Sicilian or Caro-Kann, I can't remember. But in general, like I'm just coming back to this, and I'm realizing actually how much I like it. Like I think it's like yeah, it's very promising. So I'll just put here uh, C model games 2.1 plus 2.2. Yeah, so basically, yeah, these model games I think illustrate like how you could potentially play this position and how it's just not so easy for white to play. Of course, I would need to practice this a lot, and probably it'll be good to spar these positions with someone. Um, but yeah, that's the G3 line. I've never actually explored this e takes d5 or bishop g2 line, but to my understanding, they're just very, very equal. And that's the thing as well. Like you've got to realize that yeah, these games are more equal. And if you do want something that's more imbalanced, then I would recommend you look into like playing. Oh, where did I put it? Yeah, maybe. Wait, I swear I had like some. Oh, I put it here. Sorry. So yeah, maybe play like some modern. Modern leads to very imbalanced positions, and like Hikaru uses this a lot. Or maybe even like the Caro-Kann if you're looking something for a bit objectively stronger. That's also very imbalanced. But I found that Caro-Kann has too many lines that are very critical that you need to know, and strong players often know very deep and a lot about these resources for white. And I found that the modern has been also working very well for me, as you saw a few days ago, where I, you know, analyzed that 2200 game where I played completely fine, even got a winning position, and then missed the win and ended up drawing. But I was never really at too much risk. I felt like I always had good control. So I think this Guggen, it's a modern, is just a fantastic weapon, and also has very good chances to play for the win. But ultimately, it is objectively a bit dodgy, and I think in terms of like the positions you get, they are more imbalanced. So I think this is kind of like an opening that I'd want to play more if if I have to play for the win, or perhaps I am like playing against a weaker player who I want to outplay. But with this Philidor, I feel like it's got a lot of potential to just basically outplay a stronger opponent, like these endgame lines. I think I could easily outplay a stronger opponent, and the chance of a draw is actually quite high. Like I feel like the margin of just holding the position and actually my opponent over pushing is always a situation. But in general, I feel like I've got very good chances of drawing a stronger opponent, or even potentially outplaying a weaker opponent. But the positions are more drawish, so I think that is useful in some regards, depending on what type of situation you have and what kind of mood you're in. So yeah, this was the 6G3 line, and these moves are quite drawish, but I think we should be fine. So knight takes d5 is the main move. Okay, good to see. So again, we are pushing this d5 before bishop g2, and what happens? Okay, so if they take, we take back. Here they play bishop g2. Wow, and then we just double the pawns. Like, this should be more than okay. I would be very happy to play this position. Like, the only advantage of this is sometimes they can play bishop a3 and stop us castling, but yeah, here there's literally nothing. So I'm surprised bishop g2 is even a move. What are people mostly playing here? Watch out for future opponents lurking. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm ready for the challenge, to be honest. And I think like the fact that I'm learning so much by going through these lines, like I don't mind it being public, to be honest. I mean, if people really want to learn, you know, there's so many resources they can learn openings. Like it's honestly fine. Do you want to see the card game I played today against my 2000 friend? Sure, Melora. You can send it to me. I think I will probably end the stream on Philidor, because I want to keep this concise so that if anyone wants to watch this as a resource, they can come back and watch it. But I'll probably check it out after the stream. You're welcome to send it to me. But yeah, basically, in this position, it looks like some other moves have been tried. Bishop g2, yeah, it doesn't really make too much sense. Although, okay, wow, it's played all the time on Lichess. But in terms of masters, people playing with bishop d2, which also makes sense to protect their knight, right? And then just castles. And this looks completely fine. Yeah, I think this should probably be analyzed a little further, but at first glance it feels like white really has very little. We can always play c6 eventually to blunt this bishop, and I don't think we should be doing so bad. We wouldn't want to play it now though, because we wouldn't want to like have our pawn isolated. Yeah, but maybe some plan with knight b6, and probably it's okay. But yeah, would probably need to look into this further. So this is one line, and then also bishop g2 immediately is one line, where it looks like we're just taking on e4, and d takes e4 seems to be the preferred choice. Knight e4 has been played, but let's stick with d4 for now. So d4, knight takes e4, and here there are some different options. Engine is suggesting trade everything. You know what, I kind of like the idea of forcing this bishop out from the home. It kind of weakens the king a bit. And I'm surprised bishop h3 isn't a move. I guess there's some kind of tactic. Oh, yeah, that's a bad idea. So I guess here, castles, of course, like to get the king safe. And let's say castles. Yeah, and this honestly looks fine. I mean, maybe I'd be a bit afraid of the bishop being so open on our king, but again, I think this should just be analyzed, understood, and then probably it's not going to be an issue. I think even if we play knight d7, knight f6, maybe we can play bishop g4 and bring the bishop back to g6 if needed. I think we should be okay. That'd be my feeling. Like knight d7. Yeah, I don't even know what I'd be worried about. Knight f5 maybe looks a bit worrying, but it's probably fine. Bishop f6 is played a lot. I mean, I'd probably want the knight on f6, to be honest, to defend. I'd probably want to keep the bishop out somewhere. But okay, I can see how this can immediately look a bit worrying with this bishop g5. Oh no, that hangs a queen. Okay, I need to look into this line more to fully understand this. But yeah, probably it's alright. I'm curious how, like this though, why don't they take with the bishop, not the queen? Because the queen just gives up the bishop pair again. But if bishop takes, okay, just some h6 and we're doing fine. Yeah, this is gonna need some research, which I'll do later. But the point is that the main line, which is like the main concern, where white is getting the advantage at e5, I just think is very interesting after knight g4. And after bishop g2, just knight e5. And here we have this divide between these two moves. Castles is just no good because of c6. And black is doing fine. I think maybe it's worth considering as well after knight g4. Maybe white could try a couple of different moves. In this position, what if they try and hold on to the pawn, right? What if they try and play f4, or maybe queen e2, or even this e6, or even bishop f4, right? There's like some different tries. And probably we should just research each of these and get a better understanding. But at least objectively speaking, none of these tries should be any good. I think all of these tries should be solvable, which I think I'll do another time because, as I said, I've got to get to bed. And yeah, I think this can be solved at home. So yeah, let's now move on to the second main line. And just as a reminder, we are taking a look at this position as the starting position of the Antoshin Philidor. And at this moment, apart from g3, the other move that's very popular is bishop f4. I'm just curious, actually, I had another model game. What was this model game? Okay, so this is all what we discussed. And this was just a model game to show like the bishop g4, right? When they take on d5 and they don't play queen e2. Then this was just a game to show that it all worked out beautifully for this player. This exact theory that was discussed, right, with knight b4, and then black went on to win the game. So just to show that it can come up, and this 2600 online managed to pull it off against the 2700. So definitely not all the strong players know this theory. So yeah, bishop f4. Thank you for sending it, Melora. I'll definitely check it out either tomorrow or at the end of the stream. Um, so at this moment, I would not recommend playing d5 immediately because here it doesn't make as much sense. If we play d5, we are literally playing into the hands of this bishop. So I'll put not to be mixed up with the 6g3 line. D5 immediately here is too strong due to the immediate knight db5. Yeah, and then this is just like a bit too much of a problem with the idea that this is a fork. Now, in fact, we are actually going to allow this kind of play in our main line, and it gets super, super interesting. But, you know, if it comes with a check as well, then that's a little bit too much. So what I'm going to recommend is just castling, which is very sensible. And the main move by far here, which I don't necessarily think is actually probably the best try, but you can see 2,500 times played with white, 600 times played in Master Database. This is clearly by far the main opening for white, the main move here, Queen d2. But these two moves definitely need a look as well, because they're objectively okay, and we don't get the exact same kind of counterplay. So in fact, the move that I would like to recommend after Queen d2, again, for anyone trying to study this with the white side, you've got to realize that they need to know rook e8, they need to know d5, they need to know knight c6, they need to know c6, and all of these moves are kind of playable, even a6. They're all kind of legit moves that have some logic. And the one I'm going to recommend is the one that's most popular on Lichess again. So clearly the Lichess players are understanding which ones are the fun lines, and as you can see, an amazing percentage, right? 51% win for black and only 41% for white. So clearly this line has some venom, and d5 is the move. Now, as we just discussed, well, isn't this just it playing into white's hands of this knight d5, knight c7? It kind of is, and this is the main move. As you can see, Engine is saying +1, then it's saying +0.6. Again, Engine is very confused in these lines. Don't take it at face value. So probably a few other moves should be considered as well. What happens if they take? What happens if they push? What happens if they castle queenside? And I think all of these lines deserve a look. So I will add a little arrow to give some signposting, but these are different variations. But yeah, I think, okay, this needs to be investigated further, but cool to see that knight h5 is actually better for black. I'll need to look into this later. It takes, you just take back, and I guess with a fairly even game, unless they're able to grab a pawn, which I guess they're not. Okay, they're not. So bishop g5. Okay, so I think I'll put that as a line. And also castles is also an interesting move, which probably will need more investigation, given that yeah, the Engine is actually approving of castles queenside, despite it not being the main move at all. Like you can see, it's only played in 12% of the games on Lichess, and even less, 4% in Masters Database. So I think this castle is definitely going to be something to look into. But to follow the main line after knight db5, the move in this position is to play bishop b4. And the idea of this is that you're pinning the knight, and you're next wanting to play knight takes e4. Now, in this position, if white were to take immediately, I think d4 is going to be the main issue. I wonder which line is actually better. I think this needs to be looked into again. I'll probably have to make do some research here, but the point is that after this bishop b4, the main move, the castle, which most players will probably know if they get to this situation, is that you can just play c6 here, and black will go in again. Knight queen d4 is a sideline, but most players will just not get mixed up with their theory and just play knight c7, which is the main move. And the point is here, after knight e4 hitting the queen, only now queen d4 makes most sense. And here, I'm going to show you that the main line that I'm going to recommend for black actually ends up with a bishop pair. So, in fact, there are these two options here. which are both interesting. And in fact, actually, the top players have been playing with bishop takes c3 in this position more so, including this crazy game by Mamedyarov. I'll just show this very briefly. I think, did I actually give it here? Maybe I gave, yeah, I gave the game here. I remember this game from like 3 years ago, but I looked at this position and I was just completely gobsmacked by the compensation. Just a wild game. Like, look at this. So I'm recommending to take with the bishop, but here Mamedyarov took with the knight. And in this position, the bishop's, oh no, actually Mamedyarov did take with the knight. So this is what I'm recommending actually, sorry. So Mamedyarov is playing what I recommend. And here, I'm not recommending to play knight d7, and I'm actually recommending to play a novelty bishop e6, which, as you can see, is the top engine move. And here, basically, Mamedyarov played knight d7 instead, and Grischuk went wrong with queen a4, bishop e7 back, white took, black played knight c5, queen took, knight e4, threatening c3, and here, Grischuk very understandably defended their pawn on c3, and suddenly, bishop c5 hitting the queen, and queen e7 hitting the bishop, and in this position, yeah, white already bailed out this way. Maybe this wasn't completely necessary, but this position is already very tough with, like, you know, bishop d4 is met by this. Like, what an insane position, right? So Grischuk, I think this may have been like a rapid game or something. I don't think it was classical, but yeah, this position was already completely wild, and black was just completely better. Like literally -3. Like with such initiative on white's weakened king, and the fact that the knight on a8 is probably dropping, but somehow basically black managed to mess up, and yeah, went on to actually lose this game incredibly, but just shows how like dynamic and crazy this position is. But yeah, in any case, black definitely got an advantage out of the opening, and I want to show you some of the lines that I've been researching. So in this position, yeah, we take with the knight because we want to keep the bishop pair, and we play bishop a3. And in this position, I want to suggest this novelty of knight e6. Bishop e6, sorry. And the point is that after knight takes a8, we are going to develop the queen. And, well, in this position, white already has, like, I mean, these two moves look most logical. Well, probably bishop d2 makes more logical sense than this ambitious bishop c7. But yeah, the positions are just completely wild. Like bishop c7 here, the queen is almost trapped, but then you've got this b6 move, and when they take on b6, I was researching these different ideas. Like a takes b6 is interesting, knight a6 is interesting, and yeah, it's just like, okay, probably you would need to memorize some of these continuations to remember which way to take, but it all kind of makes some sense. And like this was one line where it looks like black is actually taking over, because yeah, if white just like retreats somewhere like bishop d3, well then actually just this king is just too weak, right? Like this is just I guess takes on c3, and then in this position, how are we getting an advantage? I mean, white has an exchange up, but we've just got this insane bishop pair. And I think we are just in time to maybe cause some problems. But again, this position is going to need to be researched further. Like, why is there only 2 moves on -2 and the other moves are only like equal, right? So why is g6 or king f8 so important at this stage? So g6 makes a lot of sense, just to put these pawns on light squares to block out this bishop and make sure our king is safe. But say, what if we play like, I don't know, some weird move like h5? What is the problem with this? So it looks like rook h1 with some back rank ideas, and then it's not so easy to get an advantage. So we need to act very fast with g6. Oh, and this idea is not working now because of takes? No. In fact, we can just ignore it and play rook b2. Wow. Wow, and the threat of this is just insane to stop. Like, this is really, really fascinating to me. Yeah, this isn't going to need to be researched further, but the point is bishop c4 is some insane only move that you would only ever get through prep. And then in this position, I think this is just drawing, because black can play g6, bishop e7, c5, c4, and I think this is just like... yeah, even though you're the exchange and a pawn down, even the bishop pair against these rooks, it's like the bishops just completely dominate the rooks, and if there's no way in for the rooks, you can see like the structure is kind of solid. Then I think black will have no issue drawing. So this is like an insane line, starting with bishop e6, which is literally a novelty. And I think it's just very interesting. Like, the only difficulty with this line is that you need to be very precise. Like, it can go wrong very quickly. And yeah, knight, bishop d2 needs to be checked as well. I don't know if we get such exciting lines in these lines, but probably. Like, wow, knight a6. Like, yeah, this is definitely going to need some work. But actually, okay, knight a6 is probably able to be remembered, right? Because after you play queen a5, which is just bringing a piece towards his king, then actually on this bishop c7, okay, you've got to save the queen, and then the next move you're playing knight a6. So actually here, again, you're just playing knight a6. There's no need to play b6 immediately because the queen isn't attacked. And okay, the theory continues, right? Like, I probably need to do some more research of this position and find out what exactly is our compensation, if any, right? But yeah, I just think these positions are very rich, and the engine definitely doesn't tell the full story. And I think just some really nice opportunities to get some really interesting plays. So again, I think this d5 move after queen d2 is really nice, and I'll give d5 here an exclam as well. I think these are the key moves that kind of open the position, lead to very sharp play. But if we are very well booked up, then I think we'll be fine in terms of navigating these positions. I think they're extremely, extremely rich. And anyone playing this will need to also know like the compensation after bishop takes, because this would be like a potential main move as well. So yeah, I kind of look forward to, like, you know, maybe trying some of these lines out and seeing how I get on. Like, am I able to navigate these positions, or are they just going to be completely wild and just I don't have any hope on ever getting better at these kind of positions? Will it always stay completely wild to me, or will I start converting some of these advantages? But yeah, this is the bishop f4 line, and this is like the main theory. Like, I wonder actually in this position, maybe like bishop c4 could be quite an interesting move, because this kind of cuts out the d5 option that we've been discussing, right? But ultimately, it does look like d5 does get in eventually. Maybe we can put, like, since d5 is prevented, we should prepare it. So we can play c6, and then on castles, then we can play this d5. At least it looked like we could. Although I'm seeing that we'll have to recapture with the pawn, and I don't want to get this isolated pawn, actually. I wonder if this b5 idea and bishop b3 and b4, yeah, this is something I've actually seen in... this is so interesting to pick up a pawn. Damn. What an idea. What an idea. Yeah, so if they play a3 to stop this, then we can play d5. Nice. Okay. Okay. Interesting. So here we have a thematic sequence to win a pawn. And of course, this position is still not over, right? Like, the fact that this position is equal with black being a pawn up, it shows how much compensation that white really has. But ultimately, a pawn's a pawn. And yeah, I think this also deserves more analysis. I'll leave it unclear to leave it as a signpost. But yeah, if a3 stopping b5 b4, then yeah, this d5 move makes a lot of sense. Although actually no, we're still having to take back with a pawn eventually, so I'm not sure I understand that conversation. Maybe the fact is just like, yeah, this position is just like so open that and we're gonna maybe be able to make use of these squares. Maybe we've got like some compensation here. But yeah, very very interesting. I think this will need some further research again. Like what to do if they play a3. Do we have any other options? And yeah, maybe bishop e2 is an interesting idea as well, because again, I think this d5 move is not quite working here, because this knight db5, and yeah, the kind of compensation with bishop b4 is not really working as well. And white is actually able to take on c7 immediately. So what was the problem with taking on c7 in the main line, right? Like in this position here, they can take on c7. Aha, and we had this option of bishop a5 or d4. And when we have this exact same position again in this situation, this is not the same. Bishop a5 or d4 is just not going to be enough. Yeah, white can play a3 here. And we just don't have enough. So this is actually just not quite enough here. And how does it work in the main line that we're showing? In this position, if they were to take and we play d4, what if they play a3? Aha, in this position we can just take on e4, and this is like really strong. Right, because the queen is hit. That's the key difference. Yeah, this is really nice. Wow, what a line. You have queen d3, just bishop a5. Yeah, this is some beautiful chess. Like, the knight is pinned, the queen can't take. Like, yeah, this should probably be really understood, and like probably some like memory would be useful of these exact tactics. But yeah, this bishop f4 line is really interesting, and it's really nice just because this queen d2 move is so common. Like, I think honestly bishop e2 and bishop c4 are probably more testing, and I'll need to do some research here to find something I'm really comfortable with. But in general, yeah, this queen d2 is by far the main line, and I think like there's some really promising options with this Mamedyarov d5 idea. Do I need to know this much to reach your level? It's a good question. I think like yes and no. I mean, knowing this much about a certain opening will definitely help your chances to get to this level. But there are also ways around it. Like, you can also play more system openings that don't have as much concrete theory. But actually, in some ways, like the theory I've discussed in this stream and, you know, yesterday's stream, there, it's already cut down a lot. Because, you know, if you think about comparing this to, let's say, your bog standard e4, e5, like here, you need to know a lot of theory in Gioco Piano, lots of theory in Roy Lopez, lots of theory in Scotch, lots of theory in Ponziani, lots of theory in the four knights. You know, like, you need to know even like variations within this. Like, this is not just the Scotch, this is the Scotch gambit. This is like, how do you want to play the Scotch? There's like so many ways that, like, do you play knight f6 and you allow knight here, like bishop e3, like, okay, or knight c3, I can't remember anymore, but the point is that this is like a way bigger opening than what I'm advocating here. I'm literally just making it as simple as possible with this line, where we're basically just getting into this Antoshin situation, and only here there's one move of g3, one move of bishop f4, and now we're about to take a look at some sidelines. So I think already this Antoshin variation, this is the move order I'm advocating for. Oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? See, even I'm forgetting something, but okay, not really. Yeah, this is just the Antoshin, and then also having this endgame line, which we analyzed last stream. I think having both of these at our disposal is just really good. And just to do a test, let's see if I remember. So we want to play f6 here, and then here the main move was bishop e3, but engine likes f4, doesn't really matter. we're going to play the move knight d7. And then here, white is getting ready to castle and attack our king, so we want to play c6. And then they will castle anyway. We can play king c7, right? I haven't gone wrong. And then they can always play this f4. And we can still take back with the knight. And this was kind of the moment where I think we can already consider... I mean, we could play bishop d6 to provoke f5 and then push b5. But because white hasn't pushed a4, maybe this was the moment where we can already start like trying to harass. No, because then they can take. So we need to... Yeah, maybe we need to play bishop d6 first. And only now play for this idea. Maybe this was the point. Yeah, let's see. So in this position, did I get this all right? Or did I forget something? So c6, king c7. I remember, yeah, this was the moment where they had a4, a3, or f4. Yeah, and on f4, it's the move knight h6, right? To provoke h3. And okay, already going for this idea of b5 and knight c5. Wow, so what happens if they take? Did I cover this last time? This is interesting. Maybe, in fact, I actually want to change my theory from yesterday, right? Like, if this is the case, then maybe I actually want to be playing with bishop d5, provoke f5, and only now b5. Oh my god, and the theory continues. You can take on b5. What the hell is this? Oh my god, what the hell is this? Wow. Okay. So yeah, this is gonna need more research, right? Like more understanding. Like I mean, yesterday's stream was like a good start, but yeah, there's more to uncover. So actually, yeah, this whole line, it's actually quite subtle. We need to be a bit careful with how we execute certain ideas. Yeah, there's b5, knight c5. Yeah, and on f5 then we're very happy, but they don't have to play it, right? They can literally just take on e5. And I'm really not sure I like this knight h6 the more I look at it, to be honest. Like, I understand that it's a little trick, because if white's not careful, then we get this in. But I don't think it's worth the trick, you know? Like, if they can take and even have these options. It feels like maybe that's not something I want. So maybe again, like this bishop d6, which was like the main move, right? Like bishop d6 was the main move. And maybe this is nice, right? Like supporting the center. And if they push f5, maybe this is the moment where we need to... Well, we can't do this immediately due to the tactics. But maybe we could consider playing like b6, you know? And play for the same like bishop c5 line where we don't have to worry about these tactics because the bishop is protected. Like, I think this is really interesting to understand and consider. Yeah, wow, even b4's a move, so maybe we want to start with a5 again. See, this is just crazy. This is honestly crazy, like how deep this stuff is. I think this needs to be looked at. I think in this position, though, I'm just gonna make a quick note. At b5, this is all great if f5, but I think this is a strong move. I think I'm gonna just write, look into this. Do we really want the knight on f6? Maybe play an earlier bishop d6 to provoke f5 before playing on the queen side. So yeah, I think this is going to need to be looked into to understand this better. But yeah, let's get back to our theory. And what I'm going to say is actually, guys, yeah, on this sixth move, there are basically two main lines by far. We've got g3 and bishop f4, which are both played the most. Also, this is supported in Masters, although, okay, actually no, Masters are playing this quiet bishop e2 line as well, but it's not as critical. And basically in this position, I'd say that bishop e2, bishop c4, and bishop e3 are all other moves that can be played. And bishop e3 has a very characteristic trait of going for some Yugoslav attack. But as you can see, unlike a dragon, we haven't created a hook on our king side, and therefore this attack is going to be much slower. Like, they're going to need a few more tempi to make progress, and in that time, we actually have very fast attacking prospects on the queen side. So I think this Yugoslav line is actually not working so well for white, and there are actually a few different ways that can be played. I've given d5 here, but I think there are some different tries. So again, probably needs more research, as you know, we're understanding a lot. Maybe like the c6 with ideas of b5 look interesting, right? Like maybe, yeah, like b5. This should be the way to play it. Not with d5. This should be this is definitely nicer. I don't want to play with d5 if I can play like this. Like if they play for some Yugoslav and I can actually learn how I can be faster in this attack, this is ideal, right? Like they're gonna play for this, I'm gonna try for some. Yeah, so I'll just put we play for a faster Yugoslav attack. So the Yugoslav attack is basically one of the main ideas of how to combat the Sicilian dragon. So definitely would recommend understanding that structure because it's very instructive in terms of like opposite side castling. But yeah, this is definitely promising. And then against the bishop in e2 and bishop c4, these are kind of quieter positions. Maybe bishop c4 looks a bit more ambitious and also is restricting black from playing d5. I'm kind of surprised this line isn't more popular, but probably there is a good reason for it. Yeah, and actually this is already one of them, eh? Like we can already play knight takes e4 and just play d5. This is actually something that's probably going to be quite combative against this bishop c4. And also, actually, why can't we do this now? Probably. Oh, okay. So this is a mistake because of this surprising blow. Wow. Yeah, so that's why we need to castle first before giving this knight takes e4 motif. And then forking to regain the piece. And bishop e2. Probably there's again something not so great about this line. But probably, yeah, we need to do some further research about this kind of position. Probably there's some nice pressure on e4, and yeah, I will need to do my research. But yeah, basically all I wanted to do in this stream was basically show you the alternative kind of path that white can go down if they basically don't just chop the pawn on e5. What happens if they play the main move? And yeah, I've also just given early deviations just to see like what happens if they play other logical moves, right? Like how does this go? So yeah, I think this is basically how I would recommend like studying an opening. I literally did all of this in like one day, pretty much. I mean, like the g3 line and the bishop f4 line, this was some research that I did like a few years ago. But in general, like this whole study, this whole like, you know, recap and understanding and looking into this took one day, you know? So you, if you want to, can make a study, can try and understand. You have Lichess as a resource. You can use it in the way that I showed you guys. We have model games that we can just pick up and add to the study and look into and understand and gain deeper information. And you can create a similar study like this. And I'm hoping that I can use this like d6 e5 motif, not just against one e4, but also against one d4, maybe against one c4, maybe against even one knight f3, if I can make it work. So definitely I'm going to be doing some more research. And if anyone dares challenge me in this Antoshin Philidor line, then, okay, I'm going to be at least an extra day ahead in terms of my research on these lines. And I look forward to playing you. So I think, yeah, all of this in one day. I know it's crazy chess day. But I'll be finally taking a break because I'm going to be heading to the Netherlands in probably less than 12 hours. And I'm just visiting a non-chess friend and we're just going to hang out and have a good time. So probably the only chess I'll be doing is a lot of writing for my chessable course, which hopefully will come out in a couple months. And yeah, I think that's all from me. So thank you guys all for watching. Wish me luck to wake up tomorrow morning. And I hope that gave an interesting insider to the Antoshin Philidor. And just as a reminder, guys, this is a rare opening that is not really played as much anymore because everyone nowadays is not taking on d4, but basically, well, okay, in this exact setup they are, but most players in this position are not playing e5 and entering the endgame line, but playing knight f6, and the point is, in this position after knight c3, most players after e5 and knight f3 are playing, you can see 84%, 33,000 games of 97. This black lion is much, much, much more popular than the Antoshin Philidor. So I think you're going to catch a lot of players off guard, especially this endgame line that we looked at last time, especially this g3 line and this bishop f4 line with this d5 idea. I think these are absolutely great, so unexplored and so much room for interesting novelties and theory. Like the fact that, like bishop f4 literally has a novelty. Well, is my novelty on move 13, right? And this is literally the engine's top move, and no masters have been playing it. Like, it just shows how interesting these positions are. And yeah, I think I'm gonna be testing out, at least online, maybe even over the board at some point. But I think, yeah, these lines look really cool. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video and you learned something from this in the last video, please do give a like on the video to help the algorithm. And yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for Melora for keeping me company. And no, yeah, Malaysia is in several months. That's still a long way away. Still got some business to do in the UK and around Europe. And yeah, on that note, guys, I think I'm gonna head to bed. So I guess see you. Well, this was tomorrow's stream, so I guess see you on Sunday. And thank you all for watching. Adios.